We are going to be talking and focusing a little bit now on the clinical aspect. And normally when I get up here, I'm talking about the microbiome, but I'm actually not going to talk to you about that today. We're going to jump into utilizing smart devices. And if some of you are wondering what those are, don't worry, we'll cover what they are. So we're going to be looking at this in the context of obesity, though. And so I do want to draw everyone's attention to the obesity epidemic and truly pandemic, so we'll cover that a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the weight loss obstacles that face us for our patients, and then we're going to talk specifically about how we can leverage smart devices to try and help us be successful in managing patients through their weight loss journey. So no surprise to veterinarians that are tuning in, we have a major issue with obesity in our pet population, and that is globally. So it truly is maybe not appropriate to say epidemic, but true pandemic. In the US alone, it impacts 59% of dogs and 61% of cats. This equates to millions of dogs and cats within the country. And for all the nutritionists in the room, you know that obesity is the most common nutritional disorder in companion animals. And there are many factors that influence this multifactorial condition. As veterinarians, we tend to think about those in two big categories, the animal factors and the owner factors. Animal factors are things like genetics and breed predispositions, neuter status, and age. When we think about some of these owner-related factors, these are things like what diet the owner is choosing to feed their pet. How are they actually feeding their pet? Is the animal free choice fed, or are they actually feeding measured out meals? What type of physical activity or exercise? Are we talking about the couch potato that's sitting next to their owner watching TV every night, or the dog who's running 3.5 miles every evening with their owner? What living environment are these animals in? And then a lot of this comes down to owner attitudes towards obesity in general. And there have been many studies that have even highlighted that animal age or owner age and body composition score of the owner actually may influence whether their animals are also obese or overweight. And in a survey where they asked veterinarians how likely are these animal and owner factors, veterinarians actually report that the animal factors are a very small percentage, only about 3%, compared to 97% of why we think that dogs and cats are overweight are related to owner factors. But it's not just related to the animal or their owner. I actually think veterinarians play a big role in this disease as well. And there was a wonderful study that came out from Sutherland et al. In 2022 that highlighted that veterinarians in general actually have really limited conversations with our owners about obesity in general. And so looking at conversations that are happening in exam rooms, so appointments that are structured very close together, 15-minute appointments if you will, they went back and looked at all these recorded conversations and found that in those conversations, weight-related discussions were very brief, and that owners actually were only elicited to give very closed-ended responses, essentially, so yes-no questions when talking about weight-related issues. And then if the owner actually provided that information and the vet perceived that there was a weight issue, that as a veterinarian, we actually provided very limited information to our owners about what steps that they should be taking thinking about their pet's weight. And even we were unlikely to give reasons why we thought it was important. And in this study, it's actually really shocking, but we only spent 46 seconds talking about it. So the time that I took to present that slide is about the time that we're having weight-related discussions in the room with our pets. So we are definitely part of this issue as well. So why is this a consequence? Why is obesity such a problem? And the issue has to do with when we have excessive fat in the body. And owners, the most important reason, and one that you can grab right away, is that in obese animals, we know that it's going to reduce their life expectancy and diminish their quality of life. And what owner doesn't want their pet to live longer and have a better health span? And a lot of that has to do with the issue of chronic inflammation that obesity induces within the body. And we know as veterinarians that there's many comorbidities that come alongside obesity: orthopedic disease, increased cancer risk, as well as other disorders. And so as a veterinarian, we're faced with, well, how do we manage this in our patients? And truthfully, it's quite basic. We have two options. One, we can recommend that they feed less and take a calorie-restricted option. And we can also recommend that they move more and have increased energy expenditure. And pet owners are committed to try and do this. In fact, in a recent study, owners reported that in 62% of dog owners and 53% of feline owners, that they really do want to be successful in getting their pets to lose weight. And when those same owners were then asked what the outcomes were of their pet's weight loss journey, if we actually look at those, 2/3 of the pets are actually having successful weight loss reported by their owner. But that still means that we're failing about 1/3 of that population. So in dogs, owners reported that 12% gained back weight that they had lost, and cats that was reported at 5%. And we had 23% of dog owners and 29% of canine owners that said that they had no success with the plan that was recommended at all. And so when we think about weight loss failures, really we're talking about 1/3 of the population where owners are struggling with the recommendations that we are making as veterinarians to try and help their pets lose weight. So what are the obstacles that we need to talk about? And we have a short segment here today, so I can't go through all of them, but I want to present you with the most important one, and that's centered around owner compliance. We can make all the recommendations in the world, but if the owner does not follow them and isn't compliant with them, isn't engaged and committed to this sustained weight loss journey for their pet, their animal is not going to lose weight. And there's been a lot of research around this topic. There's a large psychological component to this. So if you have an owner that is psychologically not ready to change their own behavior, the pet is unlikely to be successful in their weight loss journey. I think a lot of us also forget that food is part of what people perceive as the human-animal bond. And so actually telling an owner that they need to restrict calories or treats and things like that actually is perceived as distressing. And so trying to address that emotional component for our owners is important. Another part is the energy expenditure. If we have an owner who they themselves can't go on a mile walk, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to get their pet to do that, right? And another big component is lack of follow-up. If we're only spending 46 seconds talking to our owners about weight loss issues, and then we make a plan, but we're not following up on a weekly basis when we should be looking and reassessing how much they're feeding, how much weight loss we've seen, if there's no communication, then how can we expect owners to be successful in this plan? And this issue of compliance is not just a veterinary issue. When we look at humans, the biggest issue for why people aren't successful in their weight loss journeys is their own compliance and following recommendations for calorie restriction, changing in diet, and exercise. So how can we overcome owner non-compliance? And really, I think this is where interventional solutions to try and enhance owner engagement and sustain commitment to this journey becomes really important. And this is where today I want to talk to you about smart devices and how we might be able to incorporate them into our plans so that owners become more engaged and more committed in the process. And many of you are like, well, what does she mean by smart devices? What are we talking about? And the basic definition is that these are everyday objects that could connect to the internet or other devices within a household. And really the goal of these devices are to collect, process, and transmit data. And when we think about this from the veterinary perspective, we're really thinking about things like owners having digital patient scales at home in order to measure body weight in patients. Or they have a digital gram scale that they can weigh out food that they're actually feeding so we know how much they're giving instead of half a can or half a scoop, right? It's also talking about automatic feeders where we can pre-portion how much animals are receiving and at very set intervals. We're talking about wearable activity monitors that can track how active patients are. And we're also talking about litter box monitors that, in this sense, could be utilized to track a patient's weight over time at home. And a lot of times when we talk about integrating some of these smart devices or technology into a weight loss plan, if you go to look in the literature for this, a lot of people are terming this as technology-enhanced weight loss programs. So why is this important, and why should we consider utilizing it in veterinary patients? So when you go back and you look at human obesity clinical trials, this technology assisted, like smart device heavy, where you can see this patient here has a scale next to them, they're looking at their weight trends in an app over time, that doing and incorporating smart devices into weight loss intervention plans actually resulted in enhanced engagement, which meant better successful outcomes for patients. And so that leads us to the question of, could we utilize smart devices to improve owner compliance in pet weight loss programs? So we're going to start out by looking at the dog data. And actually, I'm really excited to tell you that normally we have a ton of dog data to talk about, but there's actually just a smidgen. And I'm going to show you a lot more published literature on the feline side. So we'll look at that in a second. In the dog data, really we're talking about wearable collars, activity tracking collars. And there's many different brands out there. But if you haven't seen these are worn on the collar of the pet. They come with these really nice owner platforms for engagement, where they can check and see how active their dog's been throughout the day. The majority of the activity is tracked by a triaxial accelerometer in the collar, and a lot of these companies have a proprietary point system. So it doesn't give you this many steps a day. It gives you a proprietary calculation based on the movement, how active that patient was that day. Another component that's important for veterinarians to think about is that those devices actually, owners put in demographic data. So they put in information about the dog's breed, age, sex, and current weight. And then based on the activity, they actually predict and calculate the energy expenditure, calorie expenditure for the day. And they report that out to the owner on a lot of these apps that are accessible. They tend to be a very user-friendly format, and similar to the ones that are in the human side, owners can journal in them and put in special notes about new treats or a new activity that they tried, which a lot of owners like to be able to track. And so our group at Ohio State wanted to look at these devices a little further, especially related to the calorie part. And so actually during the height of the pandemic, when owners were sitting at home staring at their dogs, we recruited 23 healthy dogs to enroll in a 28-day trial. In this period, they had to calculate and put down every single item that went into the dog's mouth. And that was down to the number of Cheerios and, yes, the number of blueberries. And our nutritionist, Val Parker, then took that data that was collected over the 28 days and calculated exactly how many calories that those dogs consumed over that period. All 23 dogs maintained their weight. We had them in for weekly weights over the study. And we monitored with the device how many predicted daily energy requirement, like how many total calories were predicted that they expended over each day based on their activity measured on the device. And I know this data is small to look at, but it's just to show you the general trends. These are from 5 dogs within that study. We accepted a 20% difference in calculated calories between what went into the mouth and what was predicted by the device. And that's the line that's noted in the center with the triangles. And the dark black lines are every dog's data of how well it actually performed. And you can see that on some days it did fine. And on other days for dogs, it overestimated how many calories that they actually were expending or needing, and other days it rapidly underestimated. And remember, all these dogs didn't lose weight over the study. And so unfortunately, our group concluded that this predicted and calculated value probably wasn't really good from a research standpoint to use to try and look at energy expenditure and calculate that. And so our group doesn't use it for that, but just so you know, that is out there on these. Another way that we've looked at looking at these is we know that as patients lose weight, they increase their activity. At least that's reported by owners. But there have been limited studies that actually follow dogs over time to look at this. And so we wanted to actually examine the relationship between weight loss over time and monitoring parameters and activity monitors on the dogs and comparing it to multi-dimensional scales for quality of life, but also for the load score, if you're familiar with that, looks at mobility in general. It's a questionnaire that owners fill out. And we had hypothesized that as dogs lose weight, that their activity that we tracked would be higher, their quality of life would be higher, and those load scores, their mobility would improve. And this data that we have is actually leveraging the Canine Slim study. The point of this study is actually looking at fecal transplant for obesity in dogs. And so I won't go into all the specifics of the different treatment groups, but all 3 treatment groups, dogs wore activity monitors. They also had those surveys filled out at various time points throughout the study. This study is funded by the American Kennel Club Canine Health Foundation, and Purina did donate the food for this study. And the really amazing and rewarding part of this study is that all the dogs lost weight. So over the 24-week clinical trial, every dog in the study lost weight. You can see those there broken up by group. The unfortunate part for the FMT side is that we didn't see any major difference in dogs who got FMT versus not, but we're right now digging into the microbiome side of that with metagenomics and strain tracking, and we're finding a lot of interesting stuff there, so that to come soon. But when we go back to their overall mobility, we found that owners thought that their physical dimension of quality of life increased. And when you look at this heat map here, each individual dog is an individual row. You can see here that their points, so their movement, changed over time. Some dogs went up, some dogs went down. When we plot that all together, you can see maybe there's a slight trend towards more positive movement over time, but that wasn't statistically significant. However, the load survey questionnaire about mobility, the load scores here in that heat map now, you can see that some dogs had decreased mobility the whole time, others had decreased mobility that then changed into increased mobility, and this became statistically significant at the 12-week mark, and we could correlate that load score with their overall quality of life. So although this is a small trial with a limited number of dogs within our study, we were able to see that dogs' perceived quality of life changed, but actually the device didn't record massive changes in their activity over time. And so the biggest component of this is that really, though, the owners loved these devices, which wasn't captured as a secondary endpoint. They were actively engaged, entering their pet's weight into them, and I think having that as a weekly check-in actually helped engagement and commitment to this journey. So definitely incorporating a platform like that where owners can track these things and see that may be useful. And then in the last little bit, I want to focus on the feline data. And there are some feline-specific obstacles, although a lot of this has to do and apply to multi-cat households, things like food stealing. But probably the one I hear the most is, well, they feed different foods. So I have a cat with IBD, so there's no way I can feed a weight loss diet, or things like that. These are common obstacles that we must face. Variable feeding styles, cats who are meal-fed versus those that are ad-lib make a big difference. And food-seeking behavior in cats can be a huge obstacle for compliance. And so one of the solutions is using automatic feeders. And there's been a lot of work in this area. One study in particular looked at obese cats over a 6-month weight loss period. They weighed cats at various intervals, and the goal was to get cats to lose 0.5 to 1% of their body weight over time. There were 3 groups, one that had a standard bowl, and then 2 that had automatic feeders. In the automatic feeder group, there was one group that got fed twice a day, and one that got 6 meals a day. And actually, in the cats who had the automatic feeders, they were more likely to reach an ideal body condition over the study, with 0% with the traditional bowls compared to 40% and 83% in the different automatic feeder options. And owners reported that it was way easier to use the automatic pre-portioned feeders to be successful. They said it reduced the number of food-seeking incidences in general, but there was actually no difference in frequency. So a lot of people thought that, well, if you feed them smaller meals throughout the day, maybe they'll be less likely to have behavior changes or whatnot, but that did not reach statistical significance. So definitely automatic feeders make a big difference here. And then there's another fairly robust study that looked at putting in 4 different smart devices into a regimented weight loss program for cats. And in this, these obese cats went through a 12-week weight loss period. The traditional group was calorie restriction alone, so just reduce calories by this amount. The technology group had that, but they They also had digital scales at home the way to the pets. They had smart feeders to help dispense it. The cats wore activity monitors so owners could track their movement and activity over time. And they also had pet treat cameras so owners could see what the cats were doing throughout the day. And this technology-enhanced group had favorable reviews. They actually said that the most valuable parts of this were the automatic feeders and the home scales, and that on average this group lost more weight on a weekly basis. So the traditional group lost about 0.69%, or excuse me, the technology enhanced lost about 0.69 compared to 0.12% weight loss on a weekly basis. So definitely significantly different. And owners accepted these, especially in multi-cat households. The automatic feeders made a huge difference when you have multiple cats. And using statistics, this group looked at the overall predicted weight loss between these groups. And red, it's the traditional. You can see it's a much longer time course compared to the blue line that is the traditional, or the technology enhanced with the traditional calorie restriction. So definitely an improved amount of body weight loss. But I think one of the biggest things that we don't think about for cats when we initiate weight loss is actually what you see on this screen. And that's that in dogs are happy to come to the clinic once a week to get weighed in, right? It's fun, they love it, it's a car ride. What cat, and granted there are some out there, but the majority of cats don't want to get in their carrier to head to the vet to get a weight every week. And so really the solution for this is you have to talk to the owner about a way to measure weight at home. So this is Eugene. He is one of the members of our feline slim study, which you'll hear about in a minute. He loves his scale. And granted, this is him cheating. You can see his leg hanging off the side here. But he loves his at-home scale, and it makes it very easy where he doesn't have to come to the clinic to see me. I can talk to the owner on the phone in a virtual visit, and we can make recommendations. And now with the litter box monitors that actually track weight over time and capture it anytime the pet is stepping into the litter box, this also makes it even easier. So it took some time to train Eugene to love this scale, but obviously cats are already using a litter box, so it's much easier to use those litter box monitors as well. And actually in our feline slim study, which is the feline counterpart of the canine one, where we're looking at FMT and weight loss for cats, this is a Morse Animal funded study, we are also incorporating multiple smart devices into this study as well, including tracking cats with litter box monitors at home compared to the baby scale that you saw Eugene on, and also compared to their every 3-week weights that we're getting in our practice. And so those results will be coming soon. We have the last patient finishing that clinical trial in August. So again, a lot more on the feline side, but in general, I hope that this gets you to pause a little bit and think about some of these issues for our clients. So the obesity epidemic is rapidly accelerating. Our traditional feed less, exercise more is probably not enough. And really the big obstacle that we can focus on as veterinarians is owner compliance. And this is where we can start to think about technology enhancement with some of these various tools that I mentioned today that are easy to incorporate it into your discussion with owners and actually make their engagement and sustainability of that much, much improved. And so I couldn't have done this work without this amazing team here. So Dr. Parker was our clinical nutritionist on both of the SLIM studies. Dr. Nealon and Dr. Klein actually performed the majority and the kind of the grunt work of these clinical trials. And soon to be on Saturday, Dr. Haley Lennis is a veterinary student that helped with all the FitBark data. So I want to thank you for your time and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about novel ways to incorporate these devices.
Between Slido and the mic. Go ahead, you're first.
So have you tried time-restricted feeding? Does that work in animals like it works in people?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Time-restricted feeding, where you narrow the window during which they eat?
That's a great question about trying to narrow the window in which they have access to the food. The studies that are currently out there don't track that, and in the canine and feline side, we didn't use automatic feeders in those studies, and we unfortunately didn't have owners record how quickly they're eating the food, but that's a great point.
Slido.
Okay.
One near and dear to my heart. So for the litter box monitors, it appears that they're only going to fit a box that is smaller than what is recommended by veterinary behaviorists and others in the behavior community, right? And so are we seeing an increased risk of stress, or are we seeing an increased risk of feline polyuria getting up into the box?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I think we'll be talking more in later sessions about the litter box monitor and other applications. I will, in full disclosure, we did have a couple of slim cats who the owners tried it at home, and because they were morbidly obese, having to just increase their litter box by just a very small amount was too much. And so those cats, actually, we ended up not using it for them. So again, all of these tools that we're talking about are very patient specific. So I would say if you, have a cat who increasing the height of the litter box by just a small amount is going to be a game changer for being able to safely get in, then you shouldn't use it, right? And you'll have to use a baby scale maybe at home as an alternative. But for a lot of cats where that's not an issue, that can be helpful. The other thing to remember is that if you're tracking weight, as long as the pet is using the litter box even just once a day in there, you can have regular litter boxes around the house that don't have the monitor in it, right? So if you're worried about size, especially in cats who are predisposed to having more urinary issues, you could have other boxes. And as long as they're stepping into it from a veterinary perspective, it's really if they're getting a weight once a week, that's useful information for you. So I would say, we have to, as veterinarians, be practical. These solutions aren't going to work for everyone, but I think there's ways that we can get around it where, not every litter box has to have one of these monitors in it.
Yeah, excellent. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. I have experience with conducting these kind of trials myself as well, and I can also see that if you use technology, give them tools, they are more motivated, they want to do the extra mile with the activity tracker. You set a goal and they report to you, we did an extra walk to get to the steps, or they want a competition with each other, so they notice each other's progress. But there's also a downside, which we should also take into account, which is that we are conducting these trials. And I did post-trial evaluations, even with psychologists involved in those studies. And actually, the main motivator of owners to continue with the weight loss program was the fact that they were in the trial.
Study, yes.
And as soon as the trial stopped,
So I actually think that the biggest factor for us, and again, this is my personal opinion, but in both studies, and especially working with owners for 24 weeks, it's our team. They like having the accountability of having to check in with our team. And we see that in the human side too, right? And so that's where I think when we think about owner compliance, having a set technician in your hospital that is checking in with these owners on a regular basis will help with that sustained engagement. Because I think you're absolutely right that the moment that they don't have that, oh my goodness, I have to meet with Dr. Winston's team on this day, it changes their compliance factor. And so I think in your practice, looking at ways in which you can increase the communication, whether that's through an app in a group or it's through a technician that's doing those weekly check-ins, or even they're just sending a quick email with the dog's weight and progress, and you have someone in your practice that's capturing that and saying, great job, or ooh, we need to talk to the doctor because we've seen increases over the last 4 weeks. I think that communication piece and that engagement is so critical in these programs.
Yeah, but we can also overdo it. So some even said,
Sure.
I'm glad it's over, because
Yes.
someone was constantly on top of
Yes.
all the data.
Yes, obviously it's owner specific, but I do think like there's a reason on the human side that people sign up to be part of cohorts and to have that accountability piece. And I think we should start to think about how to make those types of cohorts in our individual practice, because I also think the peer-to-peer makes a big difference too.
Yeah, and it's very much tailor-made, but that's, unfortunate, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Dr.
thank you so
Winston.
much.
We heard